Can you hear me? I'm on mute.
Play.
Am I going through?
Yeah. Get on.
No, sorry. No, okay. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to this webinar organized by SAVA. I will give you an introduction to PVC in healthcare, and this is something about what I would like to tell you about. What is the history of PVC? Where is it used in healthcare and why it is used in healthcare? What are the limitations for the material? And what has the coronavirus taught us about the importance of plastics? And maybe one of the most interesting questions today, can the use of PVC in healthcare be a sustainable solution? Where do I come from? I am from Denmark, as was said before. I am employed by the European manufacturers of the European Council of Vinyl Manufacturers. And this is an organization based in Brussels, Belgium, and they are representing the leading PVC producers in the EU. In the EU, around 5 million tons of PVC is produced every year. Approximately only 1% of this goes to medical devices. So it's a tiny fraction, but it's of course a very important fraction of PVC when it is used in healthcare. We have a PVC network, and we are also a part of the Vinyl Plus Sustainable Program. We have in ECVM 3 value chain platforms. We have a platform for some of the main applications, or more, not main when it comes to volume, but main applications when it comes to the application. We have PVC for cables, PVC for pipes, and the PVC Med Alliance, which I will represent today. It's always funny to look back to see when was a material invented and when what is produced for the first time. Actually, PVC was not invented by the cartoon man that you see on the right side of this screen. But Dr. Fritz Klatter is a very important person when we're talking about PVC. For more than 100 years ago, he actually was the first one to have patented PVC, he showed how PVC could be industrially produced. However, he was more far ahead of his time because what he invented was not available. Such big plans that he had in his thoughts could not be realized at the time. So first in the 1930s, PVC was beginning to be produced, and now it is the third most widely produced polymer worldwide after polyethylene and polypropylene. The first medical application that was invented, so to speak, was back in the actually in the 40s. It was during the Korean War that that there was a need for some kind of invention, because to get blood supply for the soldiers, it was very difficult to drop glass containers with bloods in the battlefields. So there was an invention of PVC to contain these blood, and this was very a good invention, a very breakthrough for the use of plastics in medical. And PVC is still the only polymer used for blood bags, and because can be stored, the blood can be stored for 49 days for the blood cells, which is extremely important. especially if you have rare blood types, it is important to have this storage time. That's just something about the blood bag, but eventually PVC become more and more popular within the hospitals. You can see on this slide wall coverings, flooring, that also has been said before, gloves, blood bags said before, IV bags, dialysis bag, catheters, tubing, oxygen mask, mattress covers. And here you also see some typical PVC applications, just to show how wide a range we have. You can see blister packaging, for example. PVC is not that much used in medical packaging, but for some uses it is very important application. But also within other areas of the hospital, recreation, life saving equipment, training equipment, yes. So it's very wide used, and it is the most used single polymer in medical. There are some different figures. We have lately heard that PVC is around a little bit more than 30% of a share of around 30%, and forecast for the next 10 years more or less look the same. That the analytical people who are looking into this, they do not expect a big change in the share of the different polymers to be used in medical applications. So we have PVC as the most used polymer, and then we have a wide range of other polymers covering the 70% of the PVC of the polymer used in hospitals. And why is PVC used? As you can see here, there's a lot of properties of that PVC actually fulfills, and that is one of the characteristics with PVC, that it can fulfill so many different properties at the same time. Safety, flexibility, ease of processing, chemical stability, steerability, biocompatibility, clarity and transparency, compatibility, and of course, very important, cost efficiency. Cost efficiency is very important, of course, because we are mostly here talking about single-use products. When the main reasons for the introduction of PVC in hospitals back in the late 50s, beginning in the 60s, was the cost. It was affordable for hospitals to buy plastics that could be used only once. So therefore, plastics and PVC actually revolutionized healthcare, because the contamination between patients was decreased dramatically when plastics was introduced. So it really a breakthrough within healthcare when plastics was introduced. And it's funny to hear all these criticism against plastics in healthcare. We have people are talking about, I heard a seminar lately, plastic-free hospitals, plastic-free healthcare, and so on and so on. But people tend to forget how important this has been for the development of this high level of healthcare services that we have around the globe today. So of course it's one of our task to communicate about this, because people tend to forget. If you want to read more about these things that I'm telling about you here, you can just download different things from our PVC Med website, where there are a lot of videos, a lot of infographics that in short form tells all about how PVC is used and why PVC is used in healthcare. But of course, there are also some limitations. PVC cannot be used for everything. There are always And there is also something people tend to forget, that there is a reason why you are using a specific polymer for a specific application. Because when you hear these NGOs and so on, why don't you just use another polymer and blah blah blah? There is really technical reasons for why you are using one polymer instead of another. PVC cannot, for example, be used for implants because of tissue interactions, and also some other limitations that you see here. We actually could see here the last almost 2 years now, when the pandemic have been here in the world, that there's been a lot of users of medical devices, of plastic medical devices, not only during treatment but also testing, and as you can see here, the face masks are very important. I bought lately some month ago a face shield in polypropylene or polyethylene, I think it was. I couldn't almost. It was a shop here in Denmark that only sold PVC-free shields, and I had to buy it because I was going to use it immediately. But here you could really see how good PVC is, because it was really difficult to see through these shields. So as soon as possible, I had to buy a new PVC face shield. So you can really see the difference when it comes to transparency. Transparency, of course, yes. And you can also see aprons and protective goggles and gloves and different things according to how we could manage the corona crisis. That was a very many new inventions, innovation in the area. You can see here ventilation hood, and also some more creative shields. This is just a pilot project, but anyway, when designers are going to come up with more or less crazy ideas, they also turns to PVC. But of course, there is also a downside with all these plastics. When the coronavirus break out, I also wrote some articles saying that now PVC has been an eye-opener for how we can manage and fight such a virus. But soon after, you hear more and more concerns. That was back in May 20, in the French newspaper Le Monde, where in an article saying that in China, where at the peak of the epidemic, hospitals in the Wuhan region saw their medical waste increase sixfold, due in part to millions of masks and other single-use protective equipment used against the COVID-19. And while the containment and closure of many companies has led to an overall decrease in treated waste in France, there's one sector where volumes have exploded: medical waste, up to 50% increase. So we also saw an article in Politico, a Brussels-based important media. In the EU countries most affected by the coronavirus, waste collectors and managers had to increase working hours and have incinerators operating day and night to prevent an overflow of waste at hospitals. According to WHO, about 15% medical waste is hazardous, while 55% is not. There's no reason why the circular economy principles couldn't be applied more to the healthcare sector, says the global NGO Healthcare Without Harm. I'll come back to them in a minute. But here you can see how the picture changes. Also, if you see face masks in the streets and people getting more and more concerned about these mountain of waste that obviously it doesn't seem like anyone is working on collecting and recycling these kind of waste that's just grow and grow. So we have a big issue here, and I'll come back to that. But namely, how can we solve this issue? And of course, collecting and recycling should be a good solution, because PVC is actually well suited to recycling. In Europe alone, we recycle 730,000 tons of PVC through the Vinyl Plus Vinyl Plus program every year. It's quite a big amount. And since 2000, 6.5 million tons of PVC has been recycled. And medical PVC is also recycled. And of course, we're going to hear when Delaney later on in this seminar will tell about the very fascinating program that is running in South Africa, that we also are very much communicating about here in Europe, because it's very important to show that PVC from hospital can be recycled, and actually you can produce very important product from the recyclate, but that we'll of course hear more about later today. In Europe, we have just launched a new organization called Vinyl Plus Med, and this is a pilot project. It's a collaborative partnership where the objective is to accelerate sustainability in healthcare across Europe through recycling of disposed single-use PVC medical devices. And the project involves hospitals, waste managers, recyclers, and the PVC industry. It will be launched in Belgium in the first place, and based on the results, the intention is to spread these activities around Europe. At first, we have an objective to collect and recycle 500 kilograms of single-use PVC medical devices by the end of this year. And there are some, let's say, some issues related to it. It has to be clean and REACH compliant. The waste that you collect from the hospital, the PVC waste that you collect from hospitals, because we have REACH in Europe, these devices cannot contain DHP or other CMR labeled plasticizers. Still, there are some devices in Europe where DHP is still used. It's used still in blood bags, and we can foresee that DHP will be used in blood bags for quite a few years to come. But on all the other application PVC medical devices, there are now alternatives to DHP available. Also in the new pharmacopoeia, 4 new plasticizers are mentioned that you can use when you want to manufacture medical devices. Because if you collect medical devices containing DHP, you cannot actually recycle them, because there are so many restrictions related to the recycling of recycling of product that contained, for instance, hormone disruptors. So it's important that when we are making deals with these hospitals, that the purchasing department has to be involved. They have to make sure that when they purchase medical devices, they must be without DHP, because if you do not have DHP, you can recycle if it doesn't contain that. And of course, there are also some requirement according to prevent infection. And here you can see how this. I believe Delaney also will show how they are doing it in South Africa. They are more or less the same way a workflow in such a recycling systems takes place. Here, the Vinyl Plus provides bins and labels for the collection to the hospitals, and the hospitals, they store bags with the waste in containers. And of course, this is a crucial area where when they have to make sure that it is only PVC coming down to these bins, and they need some education of the staff, and also education of the staff, and we have seen a willingness among nurses to collect and recycle medical devices, because at home you do it, so why can't we do it in our workplace? Because I've visited many hospitals, and when nurses shows me how much waste that actually be generated just after one single surgery, it's really a lot of plastics waste, very visible waste fraction, I can say, in hospitals. So that they really are interested, and then they're collected to a waste manager. Containers come there to the recycler, and then the recycler will sell the granulate the waste, and then the are sold to converters that can use the recyclate for different products. And I think here that is what we are doing in PVC Med. We are using actually the South African school shoe project as a very good example, because for nurses, if they're going to do this extra effort in collecting these devices, if they know that it actually do some good, not only to save CO2, to reduce the mountain of waste, but also that the products being made out of the waste is something useful. Now in South Africa, it's for children, but it could be some some other things. Actually, in PVC Med later this year, we intend to have a design competition where we will ask designers to come up with ideas to what can we use this recyclate for. We intend to make a webinar where technicians within the PVC industry can make some presentations saying these are this is the technical abilities this material can do. You can doing this and this with, you can convert it into this. Telling them about the different technologies, plastic converting technologies that exist, and then they should come up with some ideas to products that could be used within healthcare. That is the idea. So if we can have some good ideas, because as I said, we think that if you have a good output, if you're not only talking about you put some on the market, some new granulate, some new recyclate on the market, it would be better to say, in this hospital we have deals with this, and we get it back actually to the hospital in form of new products. So that is the idea that we will be working with in the future. There are some barriers to recycling I mentioned before. These are both barriers and some benefits also for PVC in recycling. I mentioned before that DHP is actually, I think, the main barrier to recycling of medical devices. Another very important things when you're talking about recycling of medical products, PVC has a very, very important benefit, and that is that when you are going to collect, or you have to design for recycling, so to speak. You have to design for. Formerly, you had to design for performance. That was what the technical designers always have done when they're dealing with medical devices. We have to design for performance, safety, and so on. But now they have an additional things that they have to think about, and that is performance, safety, and recyclability. So all these three factors they need to take into account when they are designing new devices. We were attending a Technological Institute conference lately where there was a plastic expert presenting a very interesting example. You see here on the right side of this page, on the slide, an oxygen mask. Actually, you can make an oxygen mask of two different polymers, because an oxygen mask consists of a soft side and a rigid side apart. And some producers produce the soft part in soft PVC, the rigid part in rigid PVC, but other producers produce them in two different polymers. And what we have to say that PVC is the only polymer that you can actually do it, the soft and the rigid part in the same polymer. So it's of course important that when a purchaser buys these devices, they have to make sure that it's in one single polymer, because if you mix the polymers in the recycling process, they have different melting points, and the limitation of what you can use the recyclate for will be very limited. So PVC has a very big advantage here. And also we see also that the PVC free label that we see for the last 20-30 years actually is about to change, because we have for instance, in Australia, they have been recycling PVC medical devices for many years now, 20 years I think. And because they have this systems, now hospital asks specifically the purchasers or the companies for, we will have PVC devices because they can be recycled. So it's the other way around now. But a barrier to recycling, and I'm sorry to say that I think in the future it will be quite a big barrier, and that is that this NGO, Healthcare Without Harm, that I mentioned before, is quite active. It's a global, many hospitals around the world are listening to what they are saying. And last week or 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think it was, they published a new 30 pages long critique of PVC, saying that, I think it was called something like, why PVC remains a problematic material, and it listed a lot of issues related to the production of PVC, to recycling of PVC, to the use of PVC, and so on and so on. And they said that PVC should not be recycled in hospitals, it should be phased out. We have here in Denmark written quite a long critique of this this paper that Healthcare Without Harm published, because when you really look into it, it really contains a lot of mistakes, or maybe we could say there's a lot of fake news in it. So we have and if anyone are interested to read it, if they can send me an email, I can send you our critique. It's about 10 pages long with the references. So what is interesting now is, of course, for the industry to come up with counter all these false accusations about PVC, that because I've been in this business for around 25 years, and I see that history seems to repeat itself now. It seems like the pressure against PVC seems to come up again, especially about chlorine and chlorine production and so on. So there's a lot of work to do for communication people, or to communicate in a good manner on this. I think this was my last slide, and of course I am available for questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ole. That was interesting, and I certainly have learned a lot. I loved what you said in terms of the versatility and the fact that the rigid and the flexible PVC, and just how amazing product it really is. And definitely we'll be working with you guys to counter the anti-PVC messages, and we'd love you to share that link in your response as well, about the Healthcare Without Harm document, and I'm sure that we will circulate and distribute that amongst our members as well.